The rain started somewhere around Knoxville, a hard sideways kind of rain that turns the highway into a black mirror and makes every pair of headlights look like it's coming straight at you. I had the defroster cranked up all the way, but my old Chevy pickup has seen better days, and by the time I crossed into Asheville, the inside of the windshield kept fogging up, no matter how many times I wiped it with the sleeve of my jacket. 63 years old, 2 replaced knees, and I was white-knuckling a 4-hour drive through a November rainstorm, because my son had called 3 weeks ago and said, "Dad, come for Thanksgiving. We want you here." Rosie's been asking about Grandpa every single day. That was all I needed to hear, Rosie asking about me. That little girl is 7 years old, and she has her grandmother's eyes, and she still reaches for my hand in parking lots, even though she's old enough to know she doesn't have to. I would have driven through a hurricane for that. I want you to think about a time someone you would have walked through fire for looked you straight in the face and made you feel like an inconvenience. Really sit with that. Because what I'm about to tell you took me a long time to be able to say out loud. My name is not important. What matters is that I spent 38 years building a commercial roofing company from a single truck and a borrowed ladder into something that employed over 200 people at its peak. I sold it 4 years ago for more than I ever thought a boy from rural Tennessee could be worth. I live simply. I drive the old Chevy because my wife June bought it with me the year before she passed, and I am not ready to let it go. I wear the same kind of Carhartt jacket I've worn since I was 25. I don't talk about money. My son knows, in the abstract, that his father did well. His wife knows almost nothing by design. Her name is Felicia. She grew up in Charlotte, went to a good school her parents paid for, and has never held a job for longer than 18 months that I'm aware of. My son Garrett met her 6 years ago at a conference and married her 14 months later. I smiled in every photo. I danced at the reception. I told myself that love makes people choose people, and who was I to argue with love? But there were things, small things, at first. The way she'd look at my jacket when I walked in the door, the way she'd redirect the conversation whenever I started talking about the early years, the hard years, as if poverty were contagious, the way she'd look at Garrett after I said something, just a look, barely a flicker. But I'm a man who spent 4 decades reading job sites and reading people, and I saw it every single time. Last Thanksgiving I couldn't make the drive. My knees were bad. The doctor had just adjusted my medication, and I told Garrett I'd come at Christmas instead. He said, "Fine, of course, Dad. We'll see you at Christmas." But Felicia got on the phone and said, so sweetly, "We completely understand, Harold." She called me Harold. My name is not Harold. It has never been Harold. My name is Eugene. I let it go. I told myself it was an honest mistake. I thought about that phone call a lot on the drive up to Asheville. I pulled off the highway around 4 in the afternoon and stopped at a gas station to get coffee and let the feeling come back into my fingers. The rain had let up slightly. I called Garrett to tell him I was about an hour out, and it went to voicemail. I called Felicia and it rang 4 times, and she picked up sounding slightly out of breath, the way people sound when they've been talking and suddenly have to switch gears. "Eugene," she said. "Are you close?" "About an hour," I said. "Maybe a little more, the roads are wet." "Perfect," she said. "We're just getting things set up. See you soon." She hung up before I could ask to say hello to Rosie. I got back in the truck and sat there for a minute with the coffee cup in both hands. Outside, a family was loading groceries into a minivan. The father had a toddler on his hip and was trying to manage a cart with his free hand. I watched him until he got it figured out. Then I got back on the highway. Garrett and Felicia live in a neighborhood that was built maybe 10 years ago. All the houses that particular shade of gray that became fashionable for a while. Each one with a 2-car garage and the little front porch that nobody actually sits on. It's a nice neighborhood. It's the kind of neighborhood where the lawns look like they're trying to prove something. I pulled up to the house at 5:17 and sat in the driveway for a moment, listening to the engine tick down. The porch light was on. Through the front window I could see the warm flicker of what must have been the fireplace on the television. One of those log-burning videos people play. I could see shadows moving inside. I could hear, very faintly, something that sounded like laughter. I didn't knock. Garrett had told me years ago to just come in. This is your house too, Dad. Don't stand on ceremony. So I didn't. I tried the door and it was unlocked, and I pushed it open quietly because Rosie sometimes naps late and I didn't want to wake her as she was sleeping. The entryway opens into a short hallway. The kitchen is to the right. The living room is straight ahead. I heard Felicia's voice first. She was talking in the particular tone she uses when she thinks she's being funny, slightly louder than necessary, a little performative. I've heard it at family dinners. I've heard it when she's on the phone with her friends. I stood in the entryway with my hand still on the door handle, and I heard her say, clear as anything, I just don't see why we have to keep doing this every year. He drives that embarrassing truck up here. He sits in the good chair, he tells the same stories about the roof business, and we're supposed to act like it's some gift. There was a pause. Then Garrett's voice, quieter, something I couldn't make out. I know he loves Rosie, Felicia said, and there was a patience in her voice like she was explaining something to someone slow. That's not the point. The point is, we have been managing him for 6 years. And what exactly have we gotten out of it? He sold that company for a fortune, Garrett, a fortune. And we're still driving a 4-year-old Honda. We're still in this neighborhood. My mother keeps asking me why we can't upgrade, and I don't know what to tell her. Another pause. I stood very still. I talked to my brother, Felicia said. He knows a financial advisor who specializes in exactly this kind of situation. Older parent, assets, no estate plan to speak of. He said there are conversations that can be had, if the timing is right. Thanksgiving is the right timing, Garrett. He comes here, he's comfortable, he feels welcomed, and then we just have a conversation. About the future. About planning. About how it would help us to know that what he's built is going to go somewhere that makes sense. I don't know how long I stood there. It might have been 30 seconds. It might have been 2 minutes. The rain had started again, and I could hear it on the porch roof, that soft, irregular sound. I thought about June, about the year we nearly lost the company to a bad contract and a worse winter, and how she sat at the kitchen table with me at 2 a.m. going through the books, both of us in our pajamas, her with a yellow legal pad and me with a calculator, and how she looked up at one point and said, "We're going to be fine, Jean. We're going to be fine because you don't quit." I thought about that night. I thought about the truck in the driveway. I thought about Rosie asking about Grandpa every single day. I set my bag down very quietly just inside the door. I took off my jacket and hung it on the hook by the door where Garrett keeps his, and then I walked down the hallway toward the kitchen, and I made my footsteps heard, and I came around the corner and said, "Hey there, driveway's a little slick. You might want to put some salt down." Felicia turned from the counter. She had a dish towel in her hands. Something went across her face very quickly, something I recognized because I have seen it on job sites. When someone realizes I have heard something they said, then she smiled. "Eugene," she said, "you made it. How was the drive?" "Long," I said. I looked at my son. Garrett was sitting at the kitchen island. He was looking at the counter. He said, "Hey, Dad," and his voice had something wrong in it, a flatness, and he didn't get up. "Where's Rosie?" I said. "She's upstairs," Felicia said. "She fell asleep about an hour ago. She was so excited and she just, you know how kids are, they crash right when you need them awake." "Sure," I said. We had dinner. It was a good dinner, to be fair. Felicia is a capable cook. There was a turkey and a green bean casserole, and those rolls from the can that I've always secretly liked more than the homemade ones. We sat at the dining room table, and Felicia talked about a renovation she wanted to do in the spring, a primary bathroom expansion, and how much these things cost, and how the contractors in this area charge a premium because of the market. She said this while looking at me, and I looked back, and I ate my turkey. After dinner, I offered to help with dishes. Felicia said, "No, please, you drove all that way. Sit down." So I sat in the living room, and Garrett came and sat across from me, and for a few minutes we watched the game without talking. Then he said, "Dad, there's something we've been wanting to discuss with you." I looked at him. He is 41 years old, and he has my forehead and his mother's mouth, and right now he looked about 14. Felicia mentioned a financial planner, I said. His face went through 3 different things in about 2 seconds. She told you? No, I said. I heard you both talking when I came in. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight to it. Garrett put his elbows on his knees and stared at the floor. In the kitchen, I could hear Felicia at the sink. Garrett, I said, and I kept my voice level because I've been in negotiations that mattered far more than this one, and I know that volume is never the point. How long has this been the plan? Dad, it's not a plan, it's just… How long? He rubbed the back of his neck. Felicia's been talking about it for a while. I wasn't sure I wanted to bring it up. But she said, what does she know about what I have? I asked. He looked up. Not much. Just what I've told her. Which isn't a lot. And what have you told her? That you did well. That the sale was that you came out okay. Okay, I said. I nodded slowly. Okay. I stood up. I walked to the bottom of the stairs and called up softly. Rosie? Rosie? Bug? Are you awake? There was a pause. Then a small voice, blurry with sleep. Grandpa. Yeah, honey, come on down for a minute. I heard her feet on the floor, the particular sound of a 7-year-old who has not yet learned to be quiet about anything. And then she appeared at the top of the stairs in her pajamas with the little hedgehogs on them, her hair going 6 different directions. And she came down the stairs as fast as she could manage and hit me somewhere around the midsection with both arms. I held on to her for a moment. She smelled like the lavender shampoo her grandmother used to use. And I don't know if that's a coincidence or if Garrett remembered, but it hit me somewhere behind the sternum. I missed you, Grandpa, she said into my shirt. I missed you too, Bug, I said. I missed you every single day. I looked up at Garrett over her head. He was watching us. His face had gone through whatever it needed to go through, and had come out the other side looking like something had just become clear to him for the first time. Felicia appeared in the kitchen doorway, dish towel still in hand. I need you both to sit down, I said. I have some things to say. We went back to the living room. Rosie sat with me on the couch, folded up against my side, already starting to drift back towards sleep. I told her she could sleep there. She didn't argue. I looked at my son and my daughter-in-law and I said what I needed to say. I told them what I had heard. Not angrily, not with drama, just plainly, the way you describe what happened on a job site when things went wrong. I said I knew they were having financial stress. I said I understood that this neighborhood costs money, and that Felicia's expectations were what they were, and that marriage involves compromise. I said none of this was the point. The point, I said, is that for 6 years I have driven to this house and sat at this table and tried to be present in my son's life and in my granddaughter's life, and I have felt the subtext every single time. The slight impatience, the redirected conversations, the way Felicia looks at my jacket, and I let it go because I told myself I was being too sensitive. That this is just how people are now. That I was a man from a different generation and perhaps the customs were different and I needed to adjust. But what I heard tonight was not a question of customs. You talked about me, I said, like I was a resource, like I was a problem to be managed and an asset to be accessed. In front of my son. In your kitchen on Thanksgiving. Felicia started to speak. I raised one hand, just slightly, and she stopped. I'm not finished, I said. I told them that I had, in fact, spoken with an estate attorney. Not because anyone had pressured me to, but because I am 63 years old and I watched my own father die without a will, and I know what that does to a family. I told them that I had made my arrangements, that everything was in order, and that those arrangements reflected my values, my judgment, and my understanding of the people in my life. Rosie has a trust, I said. I looked down at the little girl asleep against my ribs, fully funded, with conditions about education and provisions for her independence. It's already done. It doesn't require anyone's help or input or management. Felicia's expression had changed several times during this conversation. It had been apologetic, then slightly wounded, then calculating, and now it was very still. As for the rest, I said, I'd given substantially to organizations I care about. My church, the vocational training program in Maryville that takes kids who can't afford college and teaches them a trade, the community foundation in our county. I have lived carefully and I have given carefully, and I don't apologize for either." Garrett was looking at his hands. "Son," I said, "I love you. I am going to keep loving you because that's not something I know how to stop, but I need you to understand that I see you. I see who you've become, and I see what you're willing to let happen in your own house, and those things are going to have to change if we're going to have the kind of relationship I want us to have." He looked up. His eyes were wet. "I know, Dad," he said. His voice was very quiet. "I know." Felicia said nothing. I reached into the side pocket of my jacket and pulled out the small wrapped box I'd brought from home. Rosie had told me in August that she wanted a charm bracelet, the kind with the little enamel animals, and I had found a good one and had it wrapped by the woman at the jewelry store who clearly took great pleasure in her work. I set it on the coffee table where Rosie would see it in the morning. Then I picked up my jacket from the chair where I'd draped it, and I kissed the top of Rosie's head, and she made a small sound without waking, and I looked at my son one more time. "I'm going to get a room in town," I said. "I'll come back in the morning for breakfast if that's all right. I want to see her open that." Garrett nodded. "Dad," he said, "I'm sorry." "I know you are," I said. "We'll talk more tomorrow." I walked down the hallway and out the front door into the rain. The Chevy was sitting in the driveway where I'd left it, wet and patient, and thoroughly unbothered by any of this. I sat behind the wheel for a moment with my hands in my lap. The thing about building something from nothing is that you learn early what things are actually worth. Not in dollars, in character, in consistency, in whether a person shows up when the weather is bad and the road is long and there's nothing in it for them except the fact of being there. June knew what things were worth. Rosie, at 7, already seems to understand it instinctively, the way some people just do. I started the truck and backed out of the driveway slowly, and the wipers swept across the windshield in their old, familiar rhythm, and I drove toward the lights of the town, thinking about breakfast, thinking about that little hedgehog face waking up and finding a present on the coffee table, thinking about tomorrow. That was enough. Tomorrow was enough. I keep thinking about those wipers, the way they swept back and forth in that old Chevy the whole drive home. Steady, unhurried, not trying to prove anything to anybody. There's something in that I'm still working out. What happened at Garrett's house that night wasn't a surprise. Not really. That's the part that's hard to admit. I had felt it for years, the slight impatience when I started talking about the early days, the way Felicia would look at my jacket, the redirected conversations. I noticed all of it. I just kept choosing to believe I was wrong about what I was seeing because it was easier than accepting that my son had let his house become a place where his father was managed like a problem. That's what I mean when I say the consequences of things are almost always downstream of choices we made long before the moment of reckoning. Felicia didn't wake up one morning and decide to treat me like an asset to be accessed. That took years of small allowances, small silences. And Garrett, my son who has my forehead and his mother's mouth, let those silences accumulate until they had weight and shape and were standing in his kitchen on Thanksgiving talking about financial advisors. The hardest part of that night wasn't hearing what Felicia said. It was looking at my son and understanding that he knew on some level and had not stopped it. I've been around long enough to know that intelligence without character is just a tool that can be pointed in any direction. I built a company from one truck and the borrowed ladder, and I met plenty of sharp people along the way who used every bit of their sharpness to take from whoever was closest. They weren't stupid. They were just missing something that no amount of cleverness can replace. The willingness to look at what you're doing and ask whether it's right, not whether it's working. What I wanted for Garrett, what I always wanted, was for him to be the kind of man who asks that question, who has the backbone to ask it even when the answer is inconvenient, even when his wife is standing in the next room with expectations. That kind of steadiness doesn't come from comfort. It comes from being tested and not folding. I don't think he'd been tested much. That's partly on me, but I also know that people can turn. I saw it in his face when he watched me hold Rosie. Something shifted. I don't know yet what he'll do with it, but I know it shifted. As for Rosie, That little girl in her hedgehog pajamas who came down those stairs blurry with sleep and hit me around the midsection with both arms. She already has it. Whatever it is that makes a person decent and perceptive and unafraid to show love plainly, she has it the way some people just do, the way June had it. You can't manufacture it. You can only try not to teach it out of someone. I'm 63 years old and I have made plenty of my own mistakes. I was not always present the way I should have been. There were years when the company got more of me than my family did, and I know what that cost, and I carry it. But I kept showing up. I drove through the rain. I knocked on the door, or in this case I opened it. That's the only thing I know how to tell anybody who asks me how you get through the hard parts of a life. You keep showing up. You stay honest about what you see, and you make sure the people who deserve to be taken care of are taken care of, regardless of who tries to get in the middle of it. Rosie has her trust. That's done. Whatever else happens in that house, she has something nobody can redirect. That's enough for me to sleep on.